can tell your friends and neighbors to watch it after the fact. And yeah, thanks so much for being here. And I think Wes and I are both going to be watching the chat and also open to questions as we go.
Awesome. We'll get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Give me one moment. I'm using, this is a captioning software that's built into your computer. We just made a short video about it. If you're interested, it's called Live Caption. You need to download a language package for it to work, but it seems pretty robust. So I'm going to try it out for this session and see how it does. In one moment, make sure I've got my thing on. Excellent. I'm going to keep PowerPoint in this view because I want to be able to show you where I'm clicking around in the program. PowerPoint's a software that, as instructors, I'm sure you're pretty familiar with. So hopefully today I'll be able to give you a couple of extra menu items and small things you can do that will be hopefully helpful in making your PowerPoints more accessible. My hope is that if we can kind of give some actionable strategies, that it's going to make this kind of giant thing seem a lot more doable. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And let's get started. So we're going to be talking about building accessible PowerPoint presentations. And today we're specifically going to go over, I'm going to introduce WCAG and what that is, the WCAG standards, hopefully demystify it a little bit. It's made of 4 main elements, and then each of those elements is kind of broken down into some smaller bits. We're going to do a deep dive onto the first one, and it's perceivable, how to make your documents perceivable. We're going to go over some best practices and some how-tos. And feel free to, I sent out this PowerPoint, feel free to open it up and move along with us as we go. Or you can always review it later or review this video later. We'll also follow up with some separate shorter videos for how to do these things in case you need any on-demand help. The WCAG is actually the Web Content Accessibility Guide. And that's what the WCAG or WCAG, that's what the acronym actually stands for. And it's a list of standards. We're aiming for WCAG 2.1 AA. The standards are, there's also a 2.2, and then there's a grade for each kind of item on the standard list. There's an A standard, a AA standard, and a AAA standard. So where we're aiming is the 2.1 AA standard. There is a higher threshold and there is a lower threshold. What is WCAG? What does that mean? Where does it come from? The Web Content Accessibility Guide is a set of internationally recognized standards. A lot of these standards aren't actually, if you've ever gone to and looked at the standards, there's a huge list of them, and most of those are never really going to come up in y'all's day-to-day. A lot of those things have to do with CSS coding and website and how YouTube operates. There's a lot of those standards that aren't really impactful for you. So hopefully we'll be able to isolate some specific ones that will get you kind of a long ways towards what y'all do on a daily basis. Specifically for community colleges and in this setting, it relates to anything that goes into an online format. So that's going to be any of your PowerPoints or websites or digital resources. And this is hopefully going to facilitate a change to increase accessibility, but there's a lot of research that also supports that these changes don't just help students with disabilities, it also helps all students. Once we make these documents more accessible, it allows for more students to be able to access this content. And as we go through this, a lot of these things are just good design principles. And if we work them into our workflows, they don't take too terribly much longer, and it can increase accessibility and can help a lot of different people out. The important date for this is going to be April 24th, 2026, public entities serving more than 50,000 people, which is Blue Ridge. We're a pretty sizable institution, so we're going to be in that first run of public institutions that need to be held to the standard. A year from there, smaller institutions will be able to benefit from things that we have, tried and done successfully or not, but we'll be in that first run of people really trying this out. I want to stop real quick. Are there any questions that you have thus far? Is there any questions or curiosities you have about WCAG or what it is? Cool. And Sarah made a good point. It's the size of the community you serve. And since we're Henderson and Transylvania County, that's how we get to that 50,000 person number. Cool. Thank you, Sarah. Awesome. So I'm going to keep moving. WCAG, there are four main elements. If you look at the guide, it's broken up into four main sections. And these are all things that the guide is hoping to establish as part of these standards. These are the main categories as you look through it. To make your documents perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. For a second, or real quick, we're going to focus mainly today on how to make documents perceivable, but I want to ask, can someone give me an example? What does it mean to make a document more perceivable? What does it mean for a document to be perceivable to somebody?
Means they're able to interpret it,
For sure.
understand and interpret.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What would that look like? Can you give me an example?
Sure. So for like the documents that people use screen readers for, if it's not formatted in an accessible way, then the screen reader will not perceive the language written on that document page.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, thank you, Rachel. That's an excellent point. So making these documents able to be perceived, often we can think of it just from a visual standpoint, but making them accessible for screen readers, then students are able to perceive the information that's held within that document. Awesome. Under perceivable, again, within the standards, there are a whole bunch of different little specific things. Some of the main ones that relate to the work that you do are going to be text alternatives, adaptability, and distinguishability. And these are still under that same perceivable kind of main heading. In terms of text alternatives, can somebody give me an example of where you might find a text alternative? What might that look like?
Like a caption on a picture.
Totally. Yeah, like alt text on a picture. And adaptable is a little more complicated. We're going to talk about it a little further down in. Can anyone give me an example of what might make something distinguishable in a document? What do you think that might mean? Someone besides Rachel. Rachel's been very brave. Somebody
Color
besides
and
Rachel.
contrast and font size.
Yeah, exactly. Contrast and font size. And a lot of these things come down to good design strategies. You know, if we're moving too quickly and the font's kind of small and we upload it anyways, we've all had some document we're trying to look at, looking at old PDFs that were been copied and copied and copied, and the like gray has now taken over the text. Like we've experienced that and the challenges of it. Awesome. Thank you. So a good place to start is to use the accessibility checker. And there's something I want to point out here, and it has to do with which version of Microsoft you're using. Most of y'all are probably on the 2019 version, and you can tell if you look at your screen and it looks like this and it has orange at the top. And I think most everyone's on 2019. The 2000 or the Microsoft 365 version is being released soon, and I think you will all eventually be upgraded to it. So I'm going to cover both as we go through it. The 2019 version is a little bit simpler. The 365 version has a lot more options, but the menus do have a couple of really nice quality of life things that you'll appreciate whenever you do end up getting that version. So you can do everything on both versions. So I'm going to show it as we go through. By a quick, let's see, show of hands or insert in chat, who is on the 2019 version? One. 2. Okay, and then who's on the 365 version? Show of hands or enter it in chat for me. Cool. One more for 2019. Got it. Is anybody on 365 yet?
Hi, Wes, it's Carol. I am, and I put in.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Carol. And I appreciate, I want to highlight, Carol said, if you want the Microsoft 365 version, that you can ask IT to install it for you. I think they're in the process of upgrading everybody at the moment. So if you check with them, they could probably expedite that process, but everyone should be updated to it, I believe, fairly soon. So I'm going to
I
cover
think the
both.
summer was when they said to update it, so if you want to get a head start, you just need to probably set aside it took me about an hour because I had to uninstall and reinstall, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's got a lot of quality of life changes to it that are really going to matter in terms of accessibility. There's a couple new windows, so we'll cover both of them, so you'll be able to do stuff now, but also in the future. But thank you, Carol. I appreciate you pointing that out. So with the two versions, I'm going to try to show you both the breadcrumbs, so review, check accessibility, and which version, as well as some pictures, so you can come back here to test this in the future. But I'm going to also show you both versions. So I'll show you the 2019 as well as the 365 version. So the accessibility checker is a really good place to start with these. So to try it out on this document, we're going to go to review, check accessibility, and it'll be there. So if we go review, and then check accessibility, it's going to pop up with a little window on the right over here, and it's going to show us any errors that we might have. This is saying that I'm missing alt text on picture 1. In order to add alt text, and we'll have a screen with a little more detailed view on this, but we're going to right click and edit alt text here. That's going to pop up with another window that's going to allow us to type in our alt text. It says here that I've got an arrow that I'm missing alt text on as well. And this will go through, you can actually go through your whole document with this, and it's really pretty handy because whenever you click it, it'll highlight the problematic thing. The window is already up so you can edit it. You can move through a document pretty quickly using this accessibility checker. Now, there can be problems just like with Ally. This is not completely, you can't just trust the accessibility checker score. You kind of got to work through it on your own and sort of know what you're doing. So for instance, if I look at this arrow, it says that it's a blue giraffe. It definitely isn't a blue giraffe. This would be a blue giraffe. This is an arrow pointing towards review. So just like in Ally, it is possible as you're going through to just mark everything as decorative, but that isn't really getting at the accessibility standpoint of making this approachable for people or making this actually accessible for people. So as we're working through, this accessibility checker is a great place to start, but kind of beating the accessibility checker or just getting the high Ally score if we're marking things as decorative or if we're not having good enough descriptions is kind of missing a good chunk of it. In terms of alt text, you want to, and I'll show you one more time, if you right click an image, you can click alt text and it is going to bring up this window over here. In terms of writing alt text, most alt text needs to be 125 characters or less. So if you remember old Twitter, it's a little, I think slightly longer than an old tweet. You want to provide context and you want to really think about what is the image's educational purpose? What is the educative thing that that image brings to the table? What is it you want someone to get out of it? And you want to include that to provide context. You can skip redundant phrases such as image of or picture of because the screen reader will usually announce that. And you want to be sure to end your alt text with a period because that prompts the screen reader to move on. If you have a block that has a text within it, so if you have a heading or if you have a big banner at the top that has a paragraph of text in it, maybe a poignant quote, those are kind of challenging because it's probably going to go over that 125 character limit. So usually you'll have to do some kind of additional text box below the image or a link to an additional text box because you won't be able to include all of the text in those images. So if you can't avoid those giant images with lots of text in it blocks, if you have to or want to use them, you most likely won't be able to fit that in the alt text block. You'll need to link to a separate location for it. There's some other text alternatives, captions being one of them. You can see I'm using live caption now. It should be appearing at the bottom. There are a lot of options for that. If you use Camtasia, there's a captions system in it. If you use ScreenPal, there's an auto caption available. YouTube has an auto caption available. Live caption is available on Microsoft 365. It's in the accessibility settings. You do need to download a language package, but it's actually a pretty robust captioning system. You would need to verify it to make sure that it's accurate and really capturing what you're saying, but it seems to be pretty good. Another element is adaptability. Adaptability is concerned with creating content that can be presented in different ways without losing information or structure, so that things can be used by different systems, such as screen readers or other systems that would help make documents more accessible for people. If you think about the Teaching and Learning monthly newsletter, there's the normal newsletter, and then there's an attachment for a more accessible document. We're going to be talking briefly about meaningful sequence and what that means. And if you attended, if a couple of y'all were at the Word document accessibility, that's going to be similar to our headings that we worked through in there. Finally, sensory characteristics. We're going to be talking about this again a little further down, but here it has to do specifically with navigation and being able to move through material in a course. So for instance, the sensory characteristics here, thinking about click the red button for true and false. Someone who has certain types of color blindness is really going to struggle if there's not another piece of information to guide them there. So avoiding using color as the only distinguishing feature for something, always give a backup. So having false written over top of it or true written over top of it gives a couple data points for someone to be able to click through, so they don't feel like if you're looking at this image, like trying to find the red pinpoint on the left of this image would feel like a daunting task. Not relying on color as the only form of communicating information, specifically with this for navigability through a document. And in terms of meaningful sequence, it's helpful to think about what you're doing. If you can remember back to Microsoft Word, the way we did our heading structure, main heading, and then the layers of the different headings as you go down, it's going to be similar here. So if you navigate to View and Outline View, that's going to give you a view where you can see your title and then the content underneath it. The helpful thing about this is it's going to help you see where you're at in the arrangement of your document, because often the way that PowerPoint works is it will build up the order from the bottom to the top. It assumes that you're a robot and you know exactly what you want on the thing when you start, and everything you add to it in the order that you add it is going to be built up from the bottom, which is the most important thing, to the top. If you're using templates, those often will already have a logical sequence within them. It'll put the title as the first thing a screen reader reads, and then it'll go through logically. But if you remove all of that, or if you're moving it around and changing it, then the sequence is probably going to be a little bit out of order. Whenever you I'm going to show you the selection pane in just a second. So if you're on the 2019 version, that's going to be how you're going to change and define the title of a thing. Once you get the 365 version, one of the major quality of life improvements is that you can select something, let's say meaningful sequence, for instance, and you can identify it as the title. What happens with the 365 version is you get an extra little menu ribbon for accessibility, and it gives you a lot of new options, and they're all in one place, and it's really helpful. So once you get the 365 version, those things are going to be a little bit easier to find, but there is a special thing there where you can set a slide title, which is really handy. For the version that we have now, we're going to be using the selection pane. So if we go to Home and Arrange and Selection Pane, I'm going to get rid of a couple of our windows here so we can see. Over here, you're going to see all of the different elements that are on the page. And if you select them, it's going to show which order they're showing up in. And you have to remember, and this is a really complicated part of this, and there's a change that they're making in the new software. The order for this, for the selection pane, and the order for a meaningful sequence is actually going to be built from the bottom to the top. So in this case, the title, instead of being at the top as you're arranging through your selection pane, the title actually needs to be at the bottom. And the bottom thing in the selection pane is what a screen reader will read first. In the new version, I can show you this now. In the new version, so in 365, you actually have under that accessibility menu, there's a reading order. It's exactly the same as the selection pane and what it does, but it actually orders it from top to bottom, which is a little more intuitive, I believe, for us to think about how a screen reader might approach a document. So if you're in the 2019 version, slightly counterintuitive, you could see here my titles at the top. Actually, in the 2019 version, I would need to have it at the bottom for it to be the first thing a screen reader would actually read. It's pretty easy to change. You can just drag and drop, same as in the 365 version. But in the 365 version, you can use reading order, and it'll go from top to bottom, which I know is a little bit confusing. Finally, thinking about making things distinguishable. We talked about earlier the idea of contrast and text size. And this again, a lot of this is just good design strategies as we're putting our documents together, making it easier for users to see and hear content, using color that people are going to be able to see and not using it as the only means of certain information. Of getting across information, having appropriate contrast, using good text size, and avoiding images of text. And that images of text is because of the alt text limitations. If you think about the way that we use graphs often in our classes, using color is the only way to get across a form of information or meaning. For individuals that are unable to see color, that can be really challenging. So you can see here, this is a simulation of what this here, this red and green sort of infographic-y thing would look like to an individual that was colorblind. And you can tell that it would be very hard to distinguish between those reds and greens. In order to check that out, to see if your documents are looking okay to someone who may have that particular form of color blindness, you can actually, in the 2019 version, use grayscale. And if you go to View and Grayscale, then it's going to turn your document black and white. And then you would actually be able to check out and see like, oh no, it would be kind of hard to navigate through this if it was looking like this. So it's a good way to test your document to see how it may appear to somebody. In the 365 version, you can do the same thing, but it's under that accessibility ribbon. There's a really handy website. We're not going to go to it now, but if you're ever curious about, is this text big enough? Are these colors appropriate? This is a really helpful website because it will give you the WCAG accessibility score. And if you put in the color codes for the colors you're concerned with, and it will tell you how big the text needs to be in order for it to be perceivable, and to what standard. And I don't think this is something that you have to do with every single thing you put through a document, but I do think it's an interesting website to explore a little bit just to see what all the what the possibilities are whenever you start changing things, what those scores would actually be. And I'll include that in the chat so you can navigate to it at some point. But it's pretty handy, and you can just play around with the different color values. and it will tell you what size text it would need to be in order for it to be perceivable. And getting closer to the end here, really focusing on using high quality images. It's really important if what we're trying to do is really capture students' curiosity and imagination and get them involved and engaged in our material. Drawing on good design principles, using the highest quality images that we have access to is going to have a larger impact on students' outcomes. So thinking about making things perceivable, using high quality images is really going to impact students' overall experience, and their engagement with the course as well. And I know that sometimes it's hard to find the perfect image, and there's all sorts of rules around what images we can use or not. But if you can put a little effort into really finding a high quality image, it seems to go a long ways with students. I want to stop here and kind of check in. I want to check in with everybody. How are y'all feeling at this point about this? Are you feeling overwhelmed, empowered? I want to hear from each person. We've gone through, some of y'all have gone through 2 of these now, thinking about these different elements of accessibility. But I'm just curious, considering the WCAG standards, making the documents that you have in your courses accessible, where are y'all at with this now?
Mine's sort of half and half. You mean like where are my PowerPoints with respect to what you've been talking about?
Or just the documents, thinking about how to make your documents accessible, and these kind of changes are going to be, potentially required, or they're going to be required soon. Do you feel like you've got the skills you need to be able to do that? Does it seem overwhelming? Does it seem doable? How do you feel about it?
Well, I do have a question
Mm-hmm.
because all my PowerPoints are have been turned into a YouTube video.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if what you're explaining to us today will allow me to change that. You know, I was looking into one of them, and I was trying to see, because there are spoken PowerPoints. So I was trying to see the closed captions at the end, and they didn't have any. And when I open up, the little box to change the alt text and everything else, my list was about endless of the things that I would have to change. And I have uploaded so many of those videos. So I don't know if the answer is something that you and I can talk about later, because I don't want to hold on to other people who may have questions.
For sure. Yeah, thank you, Connie. That's a really good question. YouTube, I think that there are a couple different questions within that. YouTube has a pretty good auto captioning feature, and we can send you some videos. Like a note.
So let me add one more specific question, Wesley.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that these are YouTube videos, and the fact that I explained what we're reading and doing, does that mean I still have to change the text, the pictures, and every single thing I have in the PowerPoints?
No, it's interesting. A lot of it comes down to how you're navigating the PowerPoint in the video.
Mhm.
If in your PowerPoint, if in the video, you're clearly describing each image and you're, very thoroughly covering the PowerPoint, then that could still be accessible. If you're going through and you're not really describing the graph or image that well, if you're allowing the images to kind of speak for themselves, then that's going to be a little more problematic. One thing you could do is, as you're working through and making new videos and PowerPoints, whenever you first select the alt text and you look at that huge list, it is overwhelming because there are usually so many of them. But as you start clicking through and changing them, it actually goes pretty quickly. So the little alt text thing, although it's, I know, overwhelming to whenever you first see it, that there's 100 different things you've got to do. But as you start moving through your document, the way it's designed in the system, you select it, it tells you which thing is selected, you can put in a brief description of it, and then you could always upload that PowerPoint as a link or a file available kind of in conjunction with that YouTube video. So I don't know if I can fully answer your question. So is a YouTube video okay on its own and fully accessible? I think it kind of comes down to within the YouTube video, how thoroughly you're addressing each of the elements on the slide. But it is an interesting, there's going to be so many elements like that that we're going to have to unpack as we're moving through this. But thank you for that question, Connie. And I'll find the video and send you about the YouTube captions.
Okay.
Wes, if
Thank
I
you,
could
Wes.
just add really quickly, Connie, I hear what Wes was saying, and for the most part, I completely agree with everything, but just to be very clear, anything that you change in your PowerPoint to make it more accessible, they're not going to see that in the video anyway, right? They're not going to, the screen reader's not going to, you're not using a screen reader on a YouTube video. So while it would, if you were putting the PowerPoint in as a separate file, then yes, these are updates you would want to do to that file. If the only way the students are seeing the PowerPoint is by watching your lecture video content, then it's more about how well you describe things in the video that you're making. And I just had this conversation with the department chair and said, you know, moving forward, we really want to encourage people to be thinking about accessibility on the front end. So as you get to a slide, if there's an image or a chart, you're describing that a little bit just as part of you walking through that content. But going back and re-recording a video at this point for a video that already exists, if you weren't going to update it otherwise, we're not asking you to do that.
Okay, so would you recommend, or I don't know if you're recommending me to do this, to go through the videos and make sure I am explaining what the students are seeing, kind of?
I think that would be great work for you to do, Connie, especially if those images are very descriptive and like very important for them to see as they are learning content. If you're, for example, if you were doing a lecture and you kept just saying like, this is this, and like using non-descriptive pronouns or non-descriptive words and pointing at an image, that wouldn't, like, think about closing your eyes and listening to the video, you wouldn't know what's on the screen. So you can kind of test it that way. And that might give you like a list of maybe videos that you would want to re-record sooner than later.
So I will have to re-record them.
You would have to in that case, right?
Yeah.
Because again, there's
Okay.
no alt text
Okay.
for a video other than the captioning, right?
Okay. And I don't know if I have chance for another question, but you know, some of the corrections that I received was that the documents that I have are in a foreign language, not 100%, but it's like, okay, so what do I do? I have to change them on to English, all of them, or no? Forget about it?
Because of the course that you're teaching, it's expected that you're going to have documents in a foreign language. And we have a similar issue with some other classes like in ASL, right? We wouldn't expect captions because that's part of the content that they're having to figure out for themselves. So just like that, it doesn't make sense for you to have it in English.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you both.
For sure. Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Connie. That's really important to highlight. And it kind of, the ally score and the accessibility checkers aren't perfect. So if your ally score is impacted because it says you have a, Spanish language, but it's related to the course content, then that's something that we'll be able to identify and move through. I'm hoping to hear from at least a couple of other people about where you're at with this, where you're at with the accessibility stuff and how you're feeling about it. Does it feel doable?
Hi, this is Carol. I think it's definitely doable. It's one of those you kind of you got to immerse yourself, which takes a little bit of time initially in the ramp up. I just do think it is time consuming. It's taken me about 2 to 4 hours for each course to do the updates, whatever document they're in. The accessibility checker, especially having the Microsoft 365 version, is a huge improvement for PowerPoint. It helps to just, click and go. whereas the 2019 version is a little bit slower and clunkier. So if anybody is heavy into the PowerPoint conversions now, I do recommend getting that update from IT. It'll save you some time. Yeah, I had some good discussions with Sarah a couple weeks ago about how much is enough and how much is too much for a lot of the alt text, which I guess we've had some discussions with NCCCS office there, since it does for engineering in the technical field. It's one of those, if they have to understand a diagram of a certain sort to do a problem, then it does need a little more detail, which takes a little more time.
For sure. How about you, Josh?
It feels doable, but it's just a bit overwhelming. I know what I need to do, but it's just looking at it, it's just taking it step by step.
Yeah, I think Carol has a really good point. The switch, you can definitely start working through these things with the version of PowerPoint that you have. And once you're upgraded to the 365 version, it will move a little more quickly. And like any new thing, as you start doing it, it takes a long time. And this is going to take a little bit of extra time for sure. But the more we can start working it into our taking a universal design for learning approach, the more we can work it into our processes when we're creating these educational materials, the more time and headache it's going to save us later. We're feeling the weight of changing all of our stuff over kind of at one time. As you're moving forward and updating different elements of your courses, re-recording videos, if you start addressing these things now, y'all are getting started early. So if you start addressing your course materials as you're naturally updating them, by the time this legislation is really being upheld, you're going to be in a much better position. That initial having to do all of your, documents all at once, I could see that being kind of overwhelming. But as you're starting to work through it, it gets a lot quicker as you go, and it makes a lot more sense, and it kind of becomes sort of second nature to you. And y'all are a year ahead, a little over a year ahead. So as you start working through these, just keep these things in mind. Integrate them into your production of your educational materials. And if you do that on the front end, it will save you so much stress and work on the back end. So just some final tips and takeaways for us. One, with alt text, you want to make sure the visuals are meaningful. Make sure the things that you're including in there have some kind of educational purpose, that you're using them in there for a reason, that they get something across, that there's something important about them. See, for SBC, there's something in the chat. I'm gonna check real quick. Lots of outside instructors, Fred webinars. Do we need all of them to provide accessibility measures in the materials? I'm going to let Sarah answer that. I would believe so. At least the videos would need to be captioned. Anything on a public facing digital site will need it to be accessible. But I don't know that I have the context to answer that fully. Sarah, do you mind answering the question in the chat?
Yeah, and I actually talked to Ben about this a little bit at the department meeting that we were at on Friday. Content that is provided over Zoom will be captioned, and I think that those webinars will be accessible in that they're going to be captioned, and the recordings will have captions available. If it's a webinar, I think we could do some coaching with folks and encourage them, just like we were talking about with Connie. Like, we could be coaching them to make direct reference to any images that are instructional in nature. So unless they're decorative, like, just make sure you're saying something so that anybody who's just listening, I mean, this is really a good teaching practice in general, just describing if there's an instructional image on the screen, like what you're looking at here is, and then just describing it, right? That's what we would probably do if we were in a classroom and we put an image up on the screen for students to look at. So that could be done in real time for a live webinar and would also be preserved in the recording. As far as any print materials that were delivered electronically so that people could follow along, those would have to go through an accessibility review and would need to be tagged and screen reader accessible. So yeah, so Small Business Center is part of this.
Cool. Thank you, Sarah. So making alt text, being sure to describe the content, focus on the content, not so much the appearance. Why is it included on this page? What is the thing that relates it to the material? Focusing on more of the purpose of the image and less what the image looks like. What is this a metaphor for? Why are you including this? You can skip image of and picture of. Screen readers will announce this, but remember to include a period in your alt text that prompts the screen reader to end and move on. Sequencing and reading order, ensuring a logical flow. Just like in Word, whenever you do your headings, you want to make sure that your outline structure makes sense. And right now, if we think about it, we're using visual cues to identify a title. This is final tips and takeaways. If you didn't have those visual cues, you need somewhere else where that information lies to help guide you through the document if you're using a screen reader. That kind of makes the document much more robust. The perceivable best practices, using sufficient color contrast. Whenever you're picking a theme for your PowerPoint, just make sure that it's going to be have enough contrast that it's really going to be visual. You want to don't rely on color alone. So whenever you have buttons, if you're creating them, not using click the red button for this or click the green button for that. You want to make sure your text is clear and readable, using an appropriate font size. I really encourage you to spend a minute on the website that I shared in the chat. It's really helpful. Even if you don't use it often, it's helpful to see how the contrast affects the text and what size the ratio of text would need to be to overcome the challenging contrast. It's pretty interesting to play around with it a little bit. Providing captions and transcriptions for multimedia. Auto captions have gotten a lot better. So having to type up the whole transcript isn't something you're really going to have to do. We do still need to verify that the captions are correct and are capturing what we hoped, that they're getting names correct and dates correct. We need to make sure that those captions are accurate, but you don't necessarily have to type up an entire transcription. There are a lot of really robust captioning softwares. Today, you've seen the Live Transcribe available on Innate and Microsoft. YouTube has its own. A lot of the ScreenPal has its own. A lot of the software that we're using already will provide captions. So that's a pretty helpful thing. So I'm curious at the end here, is this... Are y'all still curious about this? Is it something you want us to explore more? Would you like more of these style trainings? If so, what other software would you like us to cover? What would be most helpful for y'all moving forwards?
PDFs, please.
PDFs?
Yeah, something I was going to mention actually, Wes, as well with PDFs, given that they're usually on such lockdown from any software getting in there. So having an Adobe license is fantastic, but it's just not a luxury that we can all have. So for documents and things like that, we have licenses on our team. So it's not a fix all, but it really can fix those big things. Like, is it tagged? Set the language, and for those things that you can control with the PDFs, it's a really good solution. So I mean, let us help out with that. If it comes down to that, it's kind of the nuclear option, but we're still there.
Yep, we're definitely still here to help, and we do have the magic can opener when it comes to PDFs. But I could look into and see what other avenues are there for, if there are any other avenues for PDFs and being able to work through those. Are there any other ones that y'all are interested in or curious about?
I don't have another document, but I was thinking the template that we use for the syllabus, that template supposedly has some issues that we need to fix. So the question is, are you guys going to provide with a new version, with accessibility? So that way, we'll just have to fill in with whatever information we have for our syllabus instead of changing the entire template as provided.
For sure. Yeah. Anything that we put in your courses, we will be responsible for. We will make sure that those things are accessible and meet all of the standards. So if it's something that we are responsible for and put in your course, we're going to make sure that it's good. Honestly, we're working right along with you. This is going to be a very large project, getting all of these documents accessible and making sure everything's going to work correctly. So we're working on all of our stuff as well, but you will not be held accountable for things that you aren't that we are putting in your courses or they're required in your courses. You'll have to make sure that you're using them appropriately, but we will cover our side. Sarah, do you want to speak to that anymore?
I'll just say that I did hear from some folks with some questions and concerns around the spring template, and we will be making adjustments before the summer. So we'll get that out to you guys probably in March.
I know we're all working on this, right?
Yes, yes, it's a constant, yes, there's a lot, and saying that something is accessible and then being able to still open it in Word and use it effectively are two different things. So I think that there were some use issues that came up with the accessible template. So we're gonna correct those. Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay.
And Carol, I see your use of Microsoft Copilot to improve accessibility. It's pretty interesting. The use of AI, I just got this book recently, Elevating Educational Design with AI. Oh, it's reversed on there. It would be interesting to explore using AI to improve accessibility, and it does seem to be a pretty strong tool, especially with working in Excel documents and helping it with OCR documents. And yeah, AI is developing quickly and will definitely be impactful as we're making these changes. Cool. Are there any, I have one more screen, but before we get there, I just want to ask, are there any more questions or concerns, anything you're wondering about? Cool. Finally, I just want to say thank you. We appreciate y'all getting started on this early and making the effort to do what's required to make your documents and accessible to your students, but also all people. A lot of this stuff, again, is just good design principles, and it is going to take a little bit more time, but it will add a lot of value for your students, even the ones that don't have, a lot of time we think about these for students with disabilities. Often, a lot of these changes will be helpful for everyone. And we really appreciate y'all getting started on this process early. It's really going to set you ahead a good bit, especially if you can start working this into your regular repertoire of developing course materials. If you start building them now, within a year from now, you won't have nearly the same workload to bring your documents up to those accessible standards if you just start naturally working them into your workflow now and addressing it as you go. So we just want to say that we appreciate the effort that y'all are putting into it early. Any final statements you got, Sarah?
No, I think you said my sentiment too. We
Sweet.
all really appreciate your attention and efforts towards this, and we're learning alongside you because, as you know, there's a lot to learn, and our hope is to stay a couple feet ahead of you, but that doesn't always happen.
I just
Awesome.
had one thing. I had a student tell me, we're talking